You know, it's great to be here, and I'm excited to share these results with you today. Before I do, I want to briefly cover how we got here. So a few years ago, I was approached by some Iraq and Afghanistan war veterans who brought some information to me and were advocating on behalf of their use of medical cannabis. To say that I was skeptical is an understatement. I was doubtful. I did not believe that cannabis had any type of medical benefit whatsoever. You know, keep in mind, I'm a retired Army Master Sergeant, former law enforcement officer, but these veterans persisted. They sent me reams of articles and personal anecdotes, statements, comments from veterans who had used medical cannabis, and eventually I began to see there was enough evidence that at least warranted looking into medical cannabis. So I challenged my staff to review all of the available scientific information on cannabis from around the world. That's about 22,000 published articles. I challenged them to find all of the reports indicating efficacy, and more specifically, those that were against. I wanted to have a fair and balanced argument and be able to see both sides of the discussion. In fact, as we researched, we came across veterans who said the only reason that they were alive today and did not commit suicide was because of their use of medical cannabis. That was a pretty powerful statement. As you know, we can't change policy based on anecdotal evidence. We need the science, and we need to enter into a meaningful discussion. And in order to get that evidence, we must do clinical research. That's why in the summer of 2016, the American Legion officially resolved to advocate for the removal of cannabis from Schedule I of the Controlled Substance Act. We believe that cannabis is improperly categorized as a most dangerous and most addictive drug, which is classified right up there with heroin and ecstasy. So ironically, all of the opioids that kill more than 90% of Americans are Schedule II and Schedule III drugs. So in fact, last year, more Americans died of opioid fatalities than the number of Americans killed in action during the Vietnam War. Let me help you visualize. So imagine Chicago's Soldiers Field Stadium, packed to capacity. It's Sunday. There are over 60,000 people in that stadium. Now imagine that they're all dead. In January of this year, the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicines released a meta-analysis of more than 10,000 abstracts and reports and the reports found compelling evidence for the efficacy of cannabis in treating chronic pain, reduced spasticity in MS patients, and alleviating the symptoms of chemo-induced nausea. Here's the bottom line. Veterans are suffering. Some of us say they find relief with cannabis. We owe it to them to do the research. This is a good segue into the survey. So in October of this year, we concluded a nationwide phone survey of veteran households to determine attitudes on medical cannabis, and this is what we found. Of the veteran households surveyed, 92% of the respondents said that they support research into medical cannabis for the purpose of treating mental or physical conditions veterans face, like PTSD and chronic pain. 92%. It's a landslide. When asked if they wanted cannabis as a federally legal treatment option, 82% said they did. And that's even before the federal research is going to be able to bear out the results. When asked if medical cannabis should be federally legal, 83% said that it should. Here's the interesting thing. Only 22% of the veterans who responded said that they were using or have used cannabis to treat a mental or physical condition. It's only 22%. 40% of family members and caregivers knew a veteran who was using cannabis to treat a mental condition or a medical condition. Only 40% lived in states where they have medical marijuana laws. That means 60% of these veterans are at risk for being illegal. And support medical cannabis was eventually split by those who described themselves as liberal and conservative. can't be more of a bipartisan issue. This survey was accurate to a plus or minus 3.5 percentage points with a 95% level of accuracy across all veterans in the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, in these polarizing political times, it seems that the one thing Americans can agree on is the need to research medical cannabis. Here's the bottom line. The 2 million members of the American Legion are 100% behind cannabis research, and our survey shows that the rest of the veteran community is with us. Veterans are suffering, and we must listen when they tell us that it's working for them. And with that, I would like to introduce our sponsor for today's conference, Representative Tim Walz.
Great. Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. First of all, thank you to Lou and Verna and the American Legion sisters and brothers. I count myself proudly amongst one of those 2.2 million, and to see what you do here and leaning into issues that impact the quality of life of our veterans across this country, I am proud to call myself an American Legion member, so thank you for that. To my colleagues who are here, Mr. Gates, thank you for you're new to Congress, but you jumped in with both feet, and you're making a difference. For that, we're grateful. To my colleagues on the committee, Mr. Takano and Ms. Brownlee, members who came to Congress, asked and sought out a position on the House Veterans Affairs Committee because they wanted to make a difference, and when it comes to issues like this, they're front and center. And I think I would be remiss if I did not point out someone who has been on this issue of medicinal cannabis longer probably than anyone in the House of Representatives. The representative from Oregon, Earl Blumenauer, has been a mentor, a source of information for us, continuously providing information and research to members of Congress to get this right. Earl, thank you for that leadership. And to the advocates who are here today, and those representing not veterans, and those who are here to make a difference. You heard the numbers from Lou. You know what's out there. Each of us has a story. In my district, a young man named Jeremy, Gulf War veteran, injured, prescribed opiates, and went down that spiral that, thank God, in his case, did not lead to death. And he tells the story. And again, we can't base our decisions solely on anecdotes, as Lou said. But I watched the Secretary of the VA sit right here and talk about service dogs, and he said, you know what? I'm not going to wait any longer on the research on that because I've never met anybody who had a service dog that didn't think it improved their lives. We're hearing from veterans in the case of this that there's a chance to use the premier medical research institution in the world, which is the VA, to put its resources there and for us to start to understand better. We know anecdotally, and we know there's folks out there, they're getting relief from this, they're telling us that. And when Jeremy tells me, like so many here, that he would have been dead had he not had that opportunity, but he was forced to do it illegally. Minnesota is kind of late to the party in Minnesota, or in medicinal cannabis, and we have the opportunity that it is simply not right that our sisters and brothers in arms, depending on where they live, are put in a situation where they cannot do so on a legal basis, and they can't do so with one of their VA benefits. So what we're asking for is something as simple as do the research into this, do the reclassification, get this piece right, and then start to figure out, is there a way that we can do this in a systematic manner to make sure that the folks that need it and can get the relief are there. So this is something that is, as you heard, truly nonpartisan. I think it's way past due. We're not attempting to pick a fight with anyone on this, but it is far past. I have the privilege of representing another great medical institution in the Mayo Clinic, and a lot of private sector places are doing this research. It makes absolutely no sense to us that we do not put the resources at the VA towards this issue. We are going to do that. We're asking the Secretary, who has the ability to do so, to make some of these changes now, and we're going to attempt to build the coalition here to make that happen. So I'm grateful for all the folks. I know there's many of you have been fighting this fight for decades, literally, to make this case. I, as a veteran, and I have someone who stood alongside folks who will testify that they're alive because of their ability to do this. Thank you for that. I think it's our time to step up now, and under the leadership of the American Legion, we can get this done. Thank you for bringing your weight and your credibility to this issue. Thank you to the members who are here. I think I'm followed by Mr. Gates. So with that, thank you all for being here.
Hi, my name's Matt, and I'm a Republican. We're supposed to say, hi, Matt. To the ranking member, thank you so much for including me, I'm humbled to be here with such a distinguished group of members who care deeply for our veterans. I know today we're surrounded by many who have served. We thank you for your service, and it is our hope that in the 115th Congress, we can honor that service by moving forward with common sense, reasonable solutions that can improve quality of life for people and that can diminish some of the debilitating symptoms that we see affecting so many of our veterans when they return home. I'm the sponsor of H.R. 2020, legislation to take cannabis off of the list of Schedule I drugs. This is absolutely essential to move forward with the type of bipartisan, solution-oriented approach that I think can help a great deal of people. And I can tell you that the American Legion, joining the growing caucus of people who want to see this reform, is very significant. Just 2 weeks ago in the Judiciary Committee, I entered into our record the letter of support for the American Legion for the delisting of cannabis as a Schedule I drug. And at that meeting, Bob Goodlatte, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, committed that we would be advancing legislation out of our committee to end this absurd gag rule, to end the absurd gag rule that stops the VA from even being able to counsel veterans on the medical therapies and options that are available in the several states. It's ludicrous that veterans, when they go to the VA, would get a quality of health care, a quality of consultation, and information that would be less meaningful to them and less helpful than if they went anywhere else in our communities. And so I'm grateful that Chairman Goodlatte has made that commitment to move that legislation forward, and I truly believe it will help a great deal of veterans. It's also important to evaluate cannabis reform in the context of the opioid crisis that we currently find ourselves in as a country. And in this respect, I want to condemn in the strongest possible terms the outrageous statements made by Governor Christie recently regarding medical cannabis. It is short-sighted, it is inaccurate, and it is indefensible to suggest that the proliferation of medical cannabis that is saving lives and improving quality of life for people somehow is analogous to the plague of the opioid crisis. In fact, the evidence suggests that when we have treatment strategies available to people where they don't have to get on these terribly addictive substances, that we see a reduction in opioid deaths. And why wouldn't we, as a society, want to have the maximum options available to people so that they don't have to turn to these highly addictive substances? It makes no sense. The federal government has lied to the American people for a generation about cannabis in asserting that it has no medical value. I can tell you that it's not true. In my own neighborhood, I know a little girl who was dealing with 30 to 40 seizures a week. She's now a medical cannabis patient, and those seizures have reduced to maybe 1 or 2 a week. And what that does to someone's quality of life is very significant. When you liberate people from refractory epilepsy, when you give folks an escape from the debilitating symptoms of PTSD, and when you give people options instead of deadly opioids to turn to, you move society forward. We can do this in a bipartisan way. We can attack the opioid crisis as responsible adults turning to science. But the very first thing we have to do is heed the advice and counsel of our friends at the American Legion who have said that clinical research, accessible to veterans, able to be peer-reviewed and scrutinized is absolutely essential, because too many of my colleagues have ascribed to this antiquated dogma. Too many of my fellow Republicans are like ostriches with their heads in the sand on this issue, and only when we have research available, only when we can cite data will we be able to move this great cause forward. Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member, for including me. I want to thank Mr. Blumenauer for really a tremendous legacy of advocacy on this issue, and it's an honor to be with you today.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now hear from Representative Mark Takano, the Vice Ranking Member of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. Representative Takano.
Well, I want to also thank the leadership and the staff of the American Legion, Ranking Member Walz and Congressman GAETZ. Wonderful presentation. And I want to also thank the rest of my colleagues gathered here today. Members of Congress do spend a lot of time talking about veterans, and that's a good thing because we have a lot of work to do on their behalf. But we need to spend even more time listening to them. When a vast majority of veterans say that many Americans do not understand the sacrifices that they and their families make to keep us safe, we need to listen to them. And when a vast majority of veterans say that a strong and sustainable VA is critical to meeting their health care needs, we need to listen to them. And when a vast majority of veterans say that medical cannabis has the potential to provide relief they desperately need for their physical and mental health conditions, we need to listen to them. And that's why I joined my colleagues in asking Secretary Shulkin to conduct research into medical marijuana and the benefits it can provide to those who serve. In my community and in communities across the country, we are witnessing the tragic consequences of our over-reliance on opioids to treat chronic pain. If the VA's research confirms that medical cannabis can be an effective alternative, it will have a transformative impact on veterans' care, while also preventing countless veterans from slipping into the trap of opioid addiction. Once again, I want to thank the American Legion for producing this work. I'm committed to working with veteran service organizations and my colleagues in Congress to explore every avenue to providing veterans with safe, high-quality health care. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now hear from Representative Julia Brownlee of California, ranking member of the HVAC Subcommittee on Health.
Thank you, sir. So good afternoon, and I too want to lend my voice to thanking the American Legion for organizing this press conference and doing the survey and calling out for what we need to do here in Congress. Anecdotally, we already know that medical marijuana has great potential, from anxiety disorders to epilepsy. I've heard from constituents of mine who have found it to be a very successful way to treat a variety of issues, especially when traditional medicine has failed them. Private sector research has also shown the potential of medical marijuana to help patients address numerous conditions, including chronic pain and Alzheimer's. So there is a clear need for more rigorous research to fully determine the efficacy of medical marijuana, especially when it comes to the potential to treat veterans. As Ranking Member Walz mentioned, he and I and all the other Democratic colleagues recently have urged the VA to conduct this research into the potential benefits of medical marijuana for veterans coping with chronic pain and post-traumatic stress. The VA has for a long time been on the cutting edge of solutions for common issues impacting our veterans. It is estimated that PTSD affects 11 to 20% of post-9/11 veterans, 12% of Gulf War veterans, and 30% of Vietnam veterans. So it is imperative that the VA be at the cutting edge of solutions for PTSD, and that includes researching medical marijuana. Unfortunately, Congress has been a major barrier for the VA's ability to consider its treatment options. Last year, even, a bipartisan majority of the House voted to require the VA to allow doctors to prescribe medical marijuana in states where it is already legal. But disappointingly, that provision was stripped out of the final bill. I will continue to work with my colleagues on the VA committee to get these changes enacted into law, because medical marijuana not only has the potential to provide another treatment method for our veterans with PTSD, but also could help make headway in the battle against opioid addiction and the epidemic we are facing. In 2016, over 59,000 lives were lost nationwide to drug overdose, and over 33,000 of these deaths involved opioids. This epidemic is affecting every part of our country, tearing apart our communities and claiming our loved ones, including many of our veterans. So reducing reliance on opioid-based treatments could help tackle this tragedy that has taken far too many lives. So I thank you all again for putting this together, for shining a light on this issue, and let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to a special person, Mrs. Janine Lutz. Janine's the mother of a United States Marine by the name of John Lutz, who is a combat veteran of the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan. As an infantry Marine, John served in very dangerous places like Ramadi, Iraq, and on Operation Khanjar in Helmand Province, Afghanistan in 2009, which was the largest assault since the Battle of Fallujah in 2004. During that operation, John lost 14 teammates from his battalion killed in action. Like many combat veterans, the war followed John home to Davie, Florida, where he sought help for PTSD. John's battalion, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, their unit nickname is America's Battalion. Only the Marines could claim that. And Janine was known as the Moab. No, not the mother of all bombs, but the mother of America's Battalion. She now runs the Lance Corporal Lutz Live to Tell Foundation, which aims to reduce the suicide rate amongst veterans and first responders in South Florida. Ms. Lutz, please.
Thank you, everybody. When I considered the magnitude of the subject here today, I am here today to fight for America's veterans. And it is our hope that the story of my son, who was lost because of prescribed pharmaceuticals, will open your hearts and minds to research. I'm sorry, I'm very nervous. My heart is beating for some reason. To research cannabis, the most safe and effective treatment for our veterans today. My son joined the Marine Corps in 2006. He served for 5 years. During his service, he deployed 2 times, once to Iraq and once to Afghanistan. When he came home from Afghanistan, November of 2011, he was diagnosed with severe PTSD and traumatic brain injury. Subsequently following that, he was treated with what we know today as the combat cocktail. He was prescribed over 24 different types of pharmaceuticals. Things were still not working, and in June of 2010, they gave my son Klonopin, which is a benzodiazepine, and within a week, Johnny attempted suicide. They found him just as he stopped breathing. They saved his life, and the doctor noted in my son's chart, do not give John Lutz Klonopin, but they never told Johnny. Leaving Johnny to believe that day that he wanted to take his own life by his own free will, not knowing that it was the medication that was messing with his mind. 3 months later, Johnny was inpatient at Poplar Springs in Virginia for treatment for PTSD, and again, the doctor did not follow VA protocol, prescribed benzodiazepines, and in 3 days, my son again wanted to kill himself. But because he was inpatient, the doctor was able to stop the administration of the drug. Again, this doctor wrote in my son's chart, do not give Lutz Klonopin, failing to tell my son, again, allowing my son to believe that he wanted to kill himself because of his own free will. My son was medically retired in November of 2011. He came home and he was on about 18 different medications. He was on an opioid for his pain and many other things. And he realized he wasn't living life. He was a zombie. He wasn't leaving the house. There was no joy. He was just an empty shell. And he, on his own, somehow said, you know, he made the decision, Mom, I want to get off these drugs. And I said, great, son. And I recommended that he wean off, but he said, no, I want to get off them. I quit them cold turkey. That week, we spent 3 times in the emergency room because his heart rate got so high. But he made it through. He did continue, however, to take the morphine. Johnny blossomed. He flourished. He had joy. This was the summer now of 2012. We traveled to Colorado. We went whitewater rafting in the Colorado River. We flew to Tennessee, went whitewater rafting in the Ocoee River. There was joy, there was happiness in the Lutz house again. He was alive. There was a life event at the end of the summer, and it triggered his post-traumatic stress, and he became depressed. On January 1st, he called me to his room, and he gave me his morphine, and he said, "Mom, I need you to lock these up, and I need you to lock up all the guns in the house." Because in my son's mind, he thought his 2 previous attempts is something that he wanted to do. He did not know it was because of the pharmaceuticals, and he was terrified. So he was doing everything in his power to stay alive. On January 4th, 2013, my son went to the Fort Lauderdale VA, and his medical records read, "Mr. Lutz presents well-groomed and teary-eyed." That's a red flag. He stated that I had my mother, she's controlling my meds, red flag, and I had her lock up the guns in my house, red flag, because I'm having suicidal ideations. Huge red flag. How many chances did my sons have for his life to be saved? But instead, the VA doctor decided to give my son Klonopin. Then he went next door to see the back doctor for his pain. And that doctor gave him morphine, 90 tablets of morphine. Morphine and benzos are contraindicated. You do not prescribe them together. There's a huge miscommunication. 8 days later, my son was dead. Since I've lost my son, my eyes have been opened. My eyes have been opened. I started my foundation and I work with a lot of veterans, and I know what works and what doesn't work. I know that cannabis does work for a lot of veterans. I know that every pharmaceutical on the market today that fights against depression has negative side effects that include suicidal tendencies. Cannabis does not include that. I stand in front of you today as the mother of America's Battalion, as the voice for every veteran that right now is buried because of the prescribed pharmaceuticals. I stand here as the voice for every veteran that is incarcerated because of the prescribed pharmaceuticals. For every veteran that is divorced, that has lost their child, that right now is sitting in their room, in their house, thinking their life is over because they think they're crazy, peeking out the curtains because they're so doped up, they don't know what's real anymore. And it's the pharmaceuticals that are making them crazy. And I need everybody to hear that. We have to do something. The epidemic, this is an epidemic. It's more than 22 a day that we're losing. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. I have an ever-increasing conviction in my heart, in my mind, that cannabis can help America's sons and daughters, help them with their PTSD, and help reduce the suicide rate. Cannabis is not an entry drug, it's an exit drug. It can help with this opioid epidemic. And we must not be content with this continuous conversation. We must act swiftly and decriminalize cannabis and get it rescheduled now. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Our next speaker is Mr. Josh Frey. Josh is a U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran of 3rd Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment. He was one of the very last casualties of the Battle of Fallujah in 2004, the largest urban combat operation since the Vietnam War. Josh was part of a 6-week battle that involved vicious street-by-street and house-by-house fighting against an entrenched enemy that left nearly 100 American soldiers and Marines dead and 560 wounded. Josh was awarded his first Purple Heart in November 2002 when he was knocked unconscious and suffered other wounds from a rocket-propelled grenade blast. Less than a month later, he took a more serious wound when he got in a gunfight with an Iraqi insurgent while clearing a house in Fallujah. The insurgent and Josh simultaneously shot each other, and Josh was shot in the shoulder and dragged away by his fellow Marines loaded into a Humvee. He needed 6 blood transfusions to keep him alive and eventually underwent 22 operations. The nerve damage in his right arm makes it very difficult for him to feel with his fingers and to fully grip things. Josh is an ambassador from the veteran community who is well known in Tampa, Florida, and an outspoken advocate for medical cannabis research. Mr. Frey.
All right. Thank you very much. Hoorah! My name is, I just want to say thank you all here who served for your sacrifice. A lot of people say thank you for your service, but I want to say thank you for your sacrifice. And I got all emotional now because hearing Mama speak over there, and it's like hearing my mom speak, or it just, this is trigger season. I went in, I'll tell a little backstory. 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, we went into Fallujah 2004 on my birthday, November 8th. And to turn 28 years old in foreign land, fighting in that kind of environment was some serious heavy lifting that I was totally naive, and I was in a CAT platoon and a Mark 19 gunner, and I got enough combat to last all of us a lifetime, and I don't wish it upon anybody. When I see guys out in the streets and you know, as soon as you say, you know, Purple Heart and this and that, and man, I didn't do anything. Just be blessed you didn't do anything, and you didn't have to see the stuff that we saw, and it changes you forever. And I'm going to be changed forever, and my limitations are many. And going through my story is a little bit different than Mama's son. And when I got shot, I was sent to the hospital, and I was there for about 2 years. And I was older. I joined the Marine Corps in 2003 at age 26. And just, you know, the warrior DNA, it finds you. I always said I wasn't going to join the military. My dad was a Marine, my brother in Navy, Grandpa Army, and of course I had to join the Marine Corps because my brother joined the Navy, and I had to right the ship. So why I'm here is Boone asked me. I've been real quiet about my medical marijuana use, and if it wasn't for medical marijuana, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have kids today. I wouldn't have a beautiful wife that I've been married to for 13 years now. I chose on my own hard-headedness when I was in the hospital, because I knew marijuana. I didn't know the science behind it, but I just knew marijuana helped with all the stuff I was going through, so I took it upon myself. And to be thrown to the wolves by your own people when you come home, they basically busted me down, tried to kick me out of the Marine Corps without an honorable discharge because I took matters into my own hands, and I wasn't complying with the combat cocktail regiment from the Effexor, the mini press, the Klonopin, everything that her son was on, I was on tenfold. And that basically sent me on this long journey to be here today. And we lost 33 of our brothers in Fallujah in 2004. And I lost one of my best friends that day, December 12th. And it's about time that we, the people, especially here in this building and in the Capitol in D.C., listen to us. And without medical marijuana, I couldn't get up here and speak. I couldn't even get on a plane. I couldn't take my kids to school. I couldn't go to the grocery store. I couldn't do any of that. And with medical marijuana, I can do all that and then some, and I stay in the community. Yeah, I have lots of limitations. You may look at me, I'm totally fine, but if I had some cutoffs on, it's pretty serious stuff. But in the Marine in me is just you get up and you just do it. Yet the VA, on paper, I'm the most effed up guy you'd ever see. And to have the VA tell you you're doing something bad because it's, illegal, it was voted on, by guys that are probably dead now, long gone. We need to come stop the madness. We need to get this stuff on the books. We want to save guys. And this isn't, I'm not here for me. I could care less, I actually could care less what everybody does. You guys go home, you do all this, I do my own thing. But when you get calls on your phone every day about guys struggling and they don't want to use medical marijuana because it's illegal, and they just, no, I don't want to do that. It's sad. And I'm not just talking about my guys, I'm talking about Vietnam vets, the Korean vets. I mean, it could help a lot of veterans. And I don't know what all this is going to bring. I know the cat's out the bag. And I just know that we're not going anywhere. And whether it passes or it doesn't, I'm an ambassador to stand up for the guys who can't talk, who are sitting inside their house. And when I go to the VA, like I was saying, I could go to the VA right now and say, hey, I'm having a bad day. They'll give me a whole bottle of Klonopin. They'll give me Percocet. Well, they won't give you Percocet because I told them I smoke weed, so they won't give me anything now. But psychologically, they'll give me whatever I want. And how much money is wasted on wasted pills and lives? Because if you're smart and you don't take those pills, you're going to take those pills because they prescribe them to you. And if you're not in compliance with them, they can take away your benefits. So they force you to take the pills, make you crazy, till you want to either kill yourself or there's no other option, because I was numb. I wasn't complete. No, I didn't love, I didn't hate, I just didn't do anything. And I couldn't talk, and everything I was a walking dead. I was basically a walking dead. And now I'm not dead, and now I have all these emotions, and I'm just happy to be here. And I just want to say that America will get this right, and I'm just proud to be part of this team. And American Legion stepping up like this, it's like the tip of the spear that's taking this to the next level. And I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to let Boone, who is one of my best friends, who we both met each other when we were at our worst on the Combat Cocktail, and he didn't judge me, and I didn't judge him, and he's the reason why that I do this, and all my other brothers out there hiding that are scared to let people know that, hey, medical marijuana helps me. And the stigma, it is what it is. These pills, going through it, I'll just take one more second. I just had to get this off. These pills that they prescribed you, I haven't been on pills. I'm completely pill-free. I just want to let everybody know that. I don't take anything, unless it's an ibuprofen or something when I get a headache, but that's one every 6 or 7 months. So just to feel the way I am today, before I got shot, I'm starting to feel like me, and that's priceless. And there's only one thing that has done that, and that's medical marijuana. And I just want to say, Semper Fi, God bless America, and God bless you all, and Semper Fi.
Ladies and gentlemen, our last speaker today is Mr. Boone Cutler, a medically retired U.S. Army combat veteran of the war in Iraq. Boone fought in Sadr City, one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Baghdad, where he was injured during combat operations. He spent 24 months in Walter Reed recovering from his injuries. He's a prominent voice in the veteran space and hosts his own radio show called The Tipping Point with Boone Cutler, where he talks about issues that are important to America's warfighters. He's the author of The Spartan Pledge, where warfighters promise not to take their own lives and to find a new mission to help one another. In 2012, Boone was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's, secondary to the blast injury he sustained in Iraq. He's a national spokesman for the Warfighter Rights Movement, whose mission is to highlight issues of PTSD. Mr. Cutler.
What's your name, brother? How do you follow this? You know what I'm saying? I mean, when you have a mom that talks about losing her son, when you have another warfighter who talks about not just losing his own life and getting it back, but losing his brothers, how do you follow that? You just keep going, because at the end of the day, this is not the last of the stories. These stories continue on and on and on and on, all the way down this street. I was down this street at Walter Reed Army Medical Center for 2 years. 2 years. And during those 2 years, I was given just about every chemical cocktail you can imagine. When people look at that cocktail, they want to know two things. One, why am I still alive? And two, why isn't somebody in prison? Because it was that dangerous. After I got out of the hospital, right up here, I went back. They kicked me what they call back on the block. And I'm back on the block, and I'm doing my thing, but I'm on all the drugs. Did that for about another 2 years. Until one day, it was just like, I'm done. I can't do this. I'm not anything. And when I say not anything, I truly mean not anything. What you do is you are a zombie on the combat cocktail. I spent 17 days in a lockdown unit refusing, against medical advice, to take my medication. They said, Boone, you have to take the medication. You're going to go crazy. I was like, hey, the door's locked. Let's go crazy. Because that's what you got to do. Sometimes you got to go a little crazy to get it right up here. Now, my story is not one of Cheech and Chong. It wasn't a good time when I started using cannabis. It was simply a way to survive, because when I got out of the hospital after those 17 days, I still couldn't sleep. I was off all the zombie dope. No more Ambiens, no more benzos, none of that stuff. And I was the guy that stuff wasn't working well enough either. I would take the Ambien, the benzos, still not working, couldn't get sleep, so I'd wash it down with some NyQuil and a good amount of scotch. A lot of guys do that because they just want to go to sleep. They just want to sleep. So I got out of that hospital, and I'm going to work, and this young kid says to me, hey, Boone, you look like hell. What's wrong with you? I said, I can't sleep. He said, why don't you just get some weed? I was like, I'm not one of those guys, man. I'm not a pothead. I'm not a doper. I don't smoke weed. That night I went home. I laid down. I tried to go to sleep again, and it didn't happen. And in my time there laying in the bed, I went through every single thing I had done that medical science had given me and said, this will work for you. All the drugs, all the therapies, all the modalities, and I had literally done everything medical science had to offer. Every single thing, and none of it worked. Now let me draw this back a little bit. While I was trying to get sleep and had done everything medical science had to offer, what woke me up is the day that I reached up in my closet and I grabbed my gun and I put it to my head. And I thought, why don't I want to stop? Where is my self-preservation instinct? There was none. I found that interesting. And immediately I understood why everybody out there in my community, why they were suffering and why the suicide rate was skyrocketing. Because we lost our desire for self-preservation on those drugs. Was that my fault? Let me tell you how I got started on the drugs. I stood in front of a general officer, a field grade officer, who wrote me a prescription and said, take this, come back in a week, same time, next week. What is it, sir? It's Seroquel. It'll help you sleep. No problem. I want to go to sleep. Sleep was a problem. I lost complete control of my life from the first dose of Seroquel until I got off the dope in those 17 days in a lockdown facility. Complete control of my life. Gone. So I go to that same kid and I say, yeah, give me some weed. Hook it up, bro. And that night, I smoked marijuana. Now, keep in mind, I came from the just say no generation. Nancy Reagan, love her to death. I just said no for Nancy. Never tried cannabis. Thought it was a gateway drug, and all of a sudden, it's the devil's lettuce, right? We're all going to die if we do that. Here's what I found. I slept for 5 hours. 5 hours. And at that time, I hadn't slept for 5 hours in 5 years. But there must be a fluke. this stuff can't be that good. Tried it again. Another 5 hours. No nightmares, no pain. I didn't wake up hungover. I didn't have to get straight before I went out of the house. And for those who have been on the dope, you know what I mean by getting straight. I didn't have to get straight. And the only thing I could think of from that point was, why haven't I been doing this the whole time? Because when you save a warfighter who has come back from a combat zone, you're talking about America's treasures. And those treasures have children, and they have parents, and they have spouses. And when they go down and they do nothing but stare at that crack in the curtain day and night, and they have nothing left, well, you've also taken away from that child, from that mother, from that father. You cannot fix America until you fix this right here, because us, the warfighter community who have paid the price, who've watched our friends die, who know what sacrifice is all about, guess what? We're not integrating with the rest of you. So America never gets to learn about the sacrifice because we're too busy dying over it. This is the time for this generation and the American Legion. We have made a stand. We will make this happen because this is our time to say we will not leave you behind. I'm Boone Cutler.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard from Janine and Josh and Boone, and when veterans like that come to the American Legion and tell us that they're experiencing something that works for them, it's up to us to listen. So I just need to reiterate the American Legion's position is we're not for recreational use. What we are is for doing the research and finding out evidence, clinical evidence, as far as how can we have an adult fact-based discussion on the future policy of cannabis in the United States. With that said, we'll take questions from the press, and I would ask that if anyone has a question, they state their name and affiliation, and only ask one question at a time. Sir.
Yeah, hi, David Lotus with Cannabis Business Executive Publications. When I talk to people in Congress about marijuana, legalizing marijuana, medical marijuana, they're saying, well, show us the science. In other words, they want the FDA to show them the science, but the FDA is nowhere near having the science available to them. What can you guys do to help change it?
Well, so there are a couple of paths to success, right? One is through the administration. The administration can reschedule it, or the other is through legislation, which is why we're here today. The administration hasn't been reacting, and they haven't been taking this seriously. So it's time to look at legislative options, so that's why we're here today.
And I'd follow up on that. That's the same with me, and listening to these stories. I know everybody here, and this is a little bit of probably preaching to the choir with the folks who are in here, but these are the stories we hear all the time. How can you hear these stories and not do something about it? And I'm all for evidence-based research, but the fact of the matter is you heard them speak to this, and this is a story that is unfortunately repeated and repeated and repeated. Boone's right. They tried everything that was out there, and it didn't work for them. If he tells me it works, then it works. And at this point in time, that's what we're just asking. And we know the Secretary and the administration can do this. We think re-educating folks. We're not, again, asking for them to do anything out of the ordinary, but too many of us, and I think at some point in time, it stops here. It stops now. And all of us who got together on this and joined together said, this is our time to do something about it. And it boggles my mind that we're sitting here in 2017 and this has not happened before on a federal level. We need to make it happen. So.
Any other questions?
Leo?
Leo.
Leo Shane with Military Times. On the study, how do you take this? Do you take this as representative of the whole veterans community? And also, are you surprised to see it that high?
We actually take this on behalf of all veterans in America. It's a scientifically valid study that was done by a third-party company, and one of the things that I even skipped over and forgot to mention was that the average veteran age of the person who took this survey was 60 and above. And where have we heard that before? 60 and above is the same age of the average veteran taking their life every day. So this is important, and it's a scientifically valid study that extends to all veteran households across America.
Were you surprised by the number of what we've seen published?
You know, we knew that, we knew that the average American had supported scientific research into medical cannabis. We knew that the average veteran supported scientific research into cannabis, but no one had done a study in the past, which is why we did the study, and we were very surprised to find out that 92%, can it get higher than 92% with a plus or minus 3% accuracy? Could it get 93? Would that make a difference? Would 100% make a difference? What would make a difference? And that's why we're here today.
And Leo, your point, Leo, on the other veteran service organizations, we talked to all of them. And on the surprise part, these guys probably aren't surprised when those numbers, they see it. But I think they did the right thing. The Legion approached this in a evidence-based approach. They commissioned the study. That's what we're asking for. And I think the other organizations, they will certainly be there. They've advocated for it. It really did take someone, and it took someone of the stature of the American Legion to step forward, I think, to catapult this up to the seriousness that we're feeling. Because again, if you hear those 3 stories and you're not moved to do something, that's a pretty big problem. So I'm grateful for the leadership, but I think the others will come on with us.
Sir.
Yeah, Casey Denver, Cox Media Group. Now that you have this study, what's the next step and when will that occur?
Yeah. Well, I think for us, the way things work around here of trying to leverage this, the VA and the Secretary and the administration have the ability to do this on their own. And it seems executive orders are happening pretty often. We'd like to kind of see one of those move on this. If not, the first step was to try and get some bipartisan support together, and Congressman, I thank you for that. Your leadership is greatly appreciated. We know this will be broadly bipartisan, and it's for us to give them the opportunity to fix this. The quickest, most efficient way is for them to just make this change and to say they're going to do this. For us, if they think they need the legislation to make the case that we can do this federally across all 50 states, that's what we're prepared to introduce. So our letter basically was trying to push along a little bit, but with the intention that we are serious and we are going to get this done. So that's the next step.
Have you gotten any response from the VA?
Not yet, not at this time. It's still early, and again, I'm very hopeful because I've watched the Secretary always act in the manner of what's best for veterans. And as he sat right where we're standing here and made the case on service dogs, another area where many of us in this room worked on too, he made a bold decision to lean into that. He made bold decisions to start dealing with people who had bad paper discharges. He made bold decisions to get us onto an electronic medical record that talks with DOD. We have seen bold kind of unilateral decisions come out of this Secretary, so we think that bodes well on an issue like this.
Did you seek Republican support for your letter?
On the letter, we did not, and the reason for it is that I did not want to put anybody on the spot, put anybody out beforehand. I asked, and to be very candid with you on this, this one's very personal for me. It was very important for me as the ranking member. I only asked our side, and that does not mean we were excluding, we were doing anything. We wanted to make sure we asked first that we were committed to doing this, and then we'll build the bipartisan support. Mr. GAETZ is doing his piece of legislation that we're in total agreement with. We think one of the best ways is to use a soft hand on this and to bring people towards this rather than trying to do that. But I think it was the fierce sense of urgency that I just said, I'm sending this and we're going, especially because we had seen the data that the Legion had, and we were watching what they were doing, and it just became apparent.
I have a question. What do you think the biggest roadblock is to making this happen? Off the record.
No, I'll be. You hear that, Leo? No, I'll be on the record, and I think I think all of you know this. Yes, there's a side of that, but it's misinformation amongst folks. It's existing interests that are already in place to make things happen. It is a belief, and again, I know that it's a hard push. We're going to have to get the Department of Justice, and we'll need to get the Attorney General to align with us on this. So there are issues out there, but I think probably more than anything, it is a misunderstanding, and it is not out of malice. It's not out of anything. You represent you represent as combat wounded veterans less than 0.1% of the American population. You said it, Boone. We're just not integrating in some cases just because there aren't that many of you in terms of the general population. They don't know. So it's education. But I can tell you this, the American public, once they hear this, they want us to do what's right. I mean, this is to me, this is a Pascal's wager. It's best for us to go with this and we'll figure it out because we're seeing great things. But you're right, and I don't want to speculate on the others, but there are entrenched interests in doing things the same way over and over and over.
CBS Radio.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Phil Briggs, Navy veteran, sitting with my buddy, Army veteran, connectingvets.com. Mr. Gates, we spoke back in August about HR 2020, I believe, and not to put anybody on the spot, but to kind of follow up with my brother right there. What's a timetable for HR 2020? Because, I mean, we got brothers out there dying, and we talked about this. I'm not so well versed in the procedures that it takes to move a piece of legislation forward like this, but this seems like a lightning bolt, man. How much longer does it take to get HR 2020 looked at with a solid, serious look?
Well, it's taken a generation to demystify the lies that the federal government has told to the American people about cannabis. And my expectation is that before the end of the year, the Judiciary Committee will hold a hearing on how to enhance research opportunities and how to end the gag rule at the VA. And my hope would be that that legislation would move out of the Judiciary Committee in the first quarter of 2018. But, you know, we are dealing with a number of members of Congress who have sort of a generational bias against cannabis, and we're working hard against that member by member. And I think that Mr. Waltz made an excellent comment when he said we want to invite people to this movement, not confront them in an adversarial way. Many before you, myself included, were at times skeptics. But we have to be willing to open our hearts and, most importantly, open our minds to the science that shows us that this helps people.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. That's all the time we have today. I'd like to thank Ranking Member Walz, Representative Gates, Representative Takano, and Representative Brownlee. You can follow us at Legion in DC, and we're going to have all the documents on legion.org/MMJ research. Thank you very much.